Thank you so very much. I'm excited to be here among all of you, and many of you are familiar faces from our networks globally. So besides about 300 people attending offline in this room, we're also joined by more than 5,100 audiences online. So they are joining us through our live streaming channels. So we're excited to be, like connecting all of you to this 2024 Asia Grassroots Forum hosted by Amartha. And now we're about to start the panel 2. So here with me, we have distinguished speakers, high-rank government official from Indonesia. Let's welcome our first panelist, Pak Rida. Thank you so much for joining us. Pak Rida is now the CEO of Indonesia Investment Authority. It's a sovereign wealth fund of the Republic of Indonesia with total asset under management over $10.5 billion, ya Pak ya. So thank you so much Pak Rida for joining. And the second panelist is Pak Rabin Hatari. Thank you for joining us, Pak Rabin. Pak Rabin is the Secretary of the Ministry of State-Owned Companies or Kementerian BUMN of the Republic of Indonesia. And prior to joining the ministry, Pak Rabin is also executives with various international organizations, including the Asian Development Banks, IMF, and also World Bank. So thank you so much, Pak Rabin, for joining us. And the third panelist is our friends from our networks, CJ, or Christina Juhas. She's the Chief Investment Officer of the Women's World Banking Asset Management, or we call it WAM. So thank you so much, CJ, for flying all the way from New York to Jakarta to join this event. So, well, speaking about promoting investments into the MSMEs, my first questions will go to Pak Rabin. So, as a high-level government officials of the Ministries of State-Owned companies in Indonesia, so how do you see the investment climate in Indonesia, especially with regards to the pouring more money into the MSMEs? What are the strategies of the government? What are the policies that you've been implemented, and what are the changes that you aspire to do in promoting more investment into the MSMEs?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that very excellent questions. I think before we can answer that, I can answer that we need to also be mindful too about Indonesia economic structure. Our MSMEs, as you know, it's about 61% of our GDP. And what's interesting about that, it employs about 117 workers, right, according to Minister of Finance report. Now, most of these MSMEs employ informal sector workers. So Indonesia is one of, like any other countries that relies on domestic demands. Most of our work are informal sector workers. And this MSMEs employs most of these informal sector workers, and most of them happens to be women, right? So from a standpoint of Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, we're not so much of a sectoral ministry, right? We're basically on the ground. I mean, we would be similar to what you call a corporate ministry. We manage our companies in order to help the country grow, because being a development agent is one of our mandates. What we see on the ground, there are 5 factors that needs to be supported for this MSME. First, on providing access to finance. And it's very important. Now, our banks, Himbara banks or public sector bank, have been providing these microcredit programs, either that through interest rate subsidies, which is the KUR program, right? or through their own products, such as Kumpedes, which is being run by BRI. Second, our banks also provide financial literacy trainings, right, to micro and small medium enterprises. And lastly, we also introduced last one, Merah Putih Fund, which is basically is a venture capital funds in order to find a new unicorn, right, in Indonesia, right? Now, aside from providing access to finance, we see that there also needs to be an effort to facilitate market access. I think this very much, once you give finance, you need to give that access to the market, right, especially. In our SOE's ecosystem, we provide supply chain integrations where micro, small, medium enterprises is an integral part of our supply chains. Distribution networks, right? And also, lastly, e-commerce platform. And in this case, Ministry of SOE has introduced PADI, Pasar Digital Indonesia, which is basically is a market platform for our SOE to be interacted with the MSMEs. Third one, offering business development support. I think this is key too. Our company is also working together with a number of micro, small, medium enterprises to develop their businesses through mentorship programs, training capacity buildings, and also incubation centers. We do have Rumah BUMN or SOE houses, right? Fourth, technology adoptions, digital payment solutions, tech infrastructure, and tech training. Mandiri, for instance, have a program, have a system called Livin. BRI, we have Brimo or Pinang, right? Where basically it interact to facilitate digital payment solution for our medium, small enterprises. Lastly is advocating for policy reforms. The way that I see it, SOE's ecosystem is like a lab. Whatever you want to see about the issues in MSMEs, you can see it in the ecosystem of SOEs. So in this context, we are engaging with the sector-aligned ministries and also OJK and how can they perform, how can they improve the regulatory framework to simplify medium, small enterprises to grow. And also tax incentives, we tell them, and social protections. So that's in the context of the SOE.
Besides the tax incentives as part of the reforms that you think it could help the MSMEs to thrive, what are other interventions or policy reforms that needs to be done by our governments to ensure that more investments are going into MSMEs and that the MSMEs climate in Indonesia are more favorable from the point of view of investments?
I think this is the way that I see it from the state-owned enterprises because we're on the ground. Issues on micro, small, medium enterprises needs to be addressed not by one ministry, okay? Because the interactions between one sectoral ministry and another ministry or agencies, is very pervasive. I mean, this is the experience that I've had when I worked with ADB, when we had also a similar program on empowering MSMEs. Now that program is linked to the Cambodians' economic diversification programs, right? So you need to have a macro framework. What is the impact wants to be done on this MSMEs, and then let the other sectoral ministry also to contribute to that. In Cambodia, at that time, when I work over there, it was more about the empowering the food and beverages business. Most of them belong to women. So what we're doing is we also interacted to at that time, Ministry of Trade on improving the SPSS, phytosanitary programs, right? In order for them, so that they know what needs to be done in order to improve their product so their product can be exported to Thailand at that time. So I think this is some of the examples that needs to happen in Asia. if we are truly believe that we can empower our MSMEs to go to another level.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that later. Now I'll move into Pak Rida as top leaders of the Indonesia Investment Authority, the sovereign wealth funds of Indonesia. You're building a lot of infrastructures with your investment. So what are the theses of connecting infrastructures with promoting MSMEs and support them to grow further for a more shared prosperity for Indonesia? What are the connections between infrastructures and MSMEs?
Yeah, good morning all. Thank you for having me. I'm actually wondering why I'm invited to this forum, because a lot of our investments are not exactly in the SMEs, but hopefully if I give you a little bit of a background, you will see that somehow indirectly we are helping SMEs. So just to give you a bit of a background about who INA is, for those of you who doesn't know us, we're actually a new entity. We were established 788 business days ago, so it's not that long. We were given $5 billion as a seed capital. I don't know if the slides can show, it doesn't seem to change. That $5 billion, since our inception, has gone to $10 billion today. We have a small team of 68 people, about half of them women, half of them in the age of 35 years and younger. So I'm the dinosaur in my own organization. We invested in 4 main areas. 1 is infrastructure, 2 is digital, 3 is healthcare, and 4 is in renewable energy. So that's about who we are, what we are. We have a dual mandate, and one is supposed to help Indonesia develop sustainably, and secondly, to invest and give us the optimal risk-adjusted return. So that's the first thing I wanted to tell you about. Secondly, in our short period of time, we now own the largest telco tower. We own about 2,250 kilometers, about 1,000 lanes of toll road. We handle 55 million transactions. We have 2 million partners, many of them are SMEs. We invested in the largest hospital chain, the largest pharmaceutical. So a lot of these are indirectly have a touch into SMEs. So if I could move to the next slide, which will be going to we actually have invested now with many partners globally, whether they are other sovereign wealth funds, or they are private equities, or they are pension funds, or they are asset managers, all to hopefully develop Indonesia a better environment and then in turn hopefully help the whole economy and SMEs as an impact. But specifically on SMEs, if I may go to the next slide, is that with our investments, as I mentioned to you, we invested in data centers, we invested in telco tower, that helps speed up the advancements of digital backbone, that helps infrastructure. We invested in the modern warehouse, logistic infrastructures, and Indonesia logistic, as you know, is one of the highest cost in the world. We invested in Traveloka, which is one of the leading online travel platform in Southeast Asia with over 2 million partners, many of them are SMEs. So in short, as we invest other people to come and invest in Indonesia, we have to show either by our own investments that Indonesia means business, and hopefully that actually helps indirectly the SMEs. In the future, we are thinking and developing about venture capital specifically on SMEs, but they're still in the work and being analyzed right now. Thank you.
Right, so infrastructure is one of the key towards like improving the competitiveness of Indonesia as well, right, from the point of view of investors. what are the other things that is required for Indonesia to be more competitive compared to our, let's say, ASEAN peers like Vietnam or other markets, so that many more investment will be more coming in into Indonesia?
Yeah, Indonesia is both interesting and challenging at the same time, right? Let me talk about infrastructure first, and let me talk about other factors. I don't know if you know, but to download data in Vietnam is actually 3 times faster than it is in Indonesia. That's really sad. Indonesia has 177 megawatt of data center capacity, whereas a small country like Singapore has 7 times the data center capacity of Indonesia. That's really sad. We can't prosper if you do not have a proper infrastructure. So that's number one. Number two, Rabin talked about the policy reforms and stuff like that. That's the government side. But I think from the SME perspective, there are 2 things that I can think of. One is Indonesia's GDP income per capita is increasing, but not as fast as, so the purchasing power is actually not increasing as high as it potentially can be, which makes SME developments harder. That's actually something that I think both government and private sectors and SME has to go hand in hand. But if I may suggest, a lot of SMEs has to be even more resilient, even more getting help, even more innovative. But the sad part is the purchasing power of the countries are not increasing as fast as it can be. So I cannot pinpoint, specifically which ones. There are many other factors, but I just highlighted to you some of the challenges. I hope that's okay.
It's multi-dimensional, I would say. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next speaker, CJ. Hi, how are you?
Hi, thank you. Good.
Thank you.
Good, Arya, thank you.
So, yeah, CJ from Women's World Banking Asset Management is also a key player in making sure that investments are pouring into gender lens investment. So, what's your strategy to make sure that many more women are onboarded into the formal economy, and what are the roles of WAM in making this a reality? Please.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Arya, and I'm really delighted to be here, so thank you very much. I'd love to tell you a little bit more, expand a little bit more on your question, what is Women's World Banking Asset Management, and how are we helping change outcomes for women? So if we could advance the slide. Actually, are they up? Yeah. So yeah, what Women's World Banking Asset Management is seeking to do as an investor is capitalize on an enormous untapped opportunity. And that is to invest in women as economic actors. Women contribute mightily to local communities and local economies, and they are also very good business risks for financial institutions, which I hope to impress on you in the next couple slides. But they're very rarely still seen as such. So we would say there's still 1 billion women globally lack access even to a simple bank account. And there is a globally still 9% gender gap in access to finance and financial inclusion. Speaking of SMEs, a recent study by IFC showed that there's about 1.5 trillion credit gap for women-owned SMEs. So that's a lot of trillions of dollars. Sorry, if we could take the slide back still, one. Thank you. So what we seek to do is to invest locally. So we invest in the emerging markets. We invest in local financial institutions. And through that mechanism, we can reach women at scale. And we seek to help those local financial institutions with their customer acquisition strategy, focusing how they can reach more women-owned SMEs, and also on their talent acquisition strategy. Because women make fantastic employees up and down the employment base of any institution, and they also contribute to the success of the companies that they're working for. So that's the other lever of influence that we seek to push on the companies that we invest in. We have about 150 million assets under management today across 2 funds, and we are a subsidiary of Women's World Banking, which is an NGO which is focused on increasing access to finance, specifically for women. So as an investor, we're able to tap into that thought leadership and expertise and apply it to the institutions that we're investing in. So if we do move on to the next slide, I just want to leave you with a few more statistics about the opportunity. So I mentioned 1 billion women still missing access to finance, 9% gender gap. We see 80% of SME loan volume globally going to male-owned SMEs. And we know that women-owned SMEs in this country are about 70% of the economy. So there's a big gap. What is the opportunity? Some figures here. Oliver Wyman assumed or did an analysis together with the UN, which showed a 330 billion additional increase in GDP globally if we were able to close the gender gap in access to finance. On the insurance side, we could have 500 billion more insurance premiums written if insurers provided policies to women at the same rate as men. And then finally, 30 billion added to global financial services if banks provided women-owned businesses with loans at the same rate they provide male-owned businesses. So there's a lot of money being left on the table. Some points from our own expertise. Within our portfolio companies, we do see that those that have the highest percentage of women also have the highest ROE and growth. We also know that women are better repayers, and importantly, they have a higher retention rate. Both women customers and women employees have a higher retention rate, and that's an important business driver for the companies we invest in. I want to turn briefly on the next slide. One of our investments is in Amartha. So that's a fantastic case study for our type of investment. If we could advance the slide, please. So in 2021, we invested $12 million in Amartha. Our investment rationale is that we saw a rapidly growing business with the potential to really reach women that are in the islands, and they're rural and they're isolated. And through its P2P technology, Amartha really had found a way to reach them. We appreciated their desire to expand into a diverse set of financial services, including savings, payments, insurance. And we felt we could help them with their product expansion and accessing women that they weren't reaching, both as customers and as employees. So in 2022, we did a deep dive technical assistance research project and came up with some strategies together with Amartha on how to reach women better and how to employ more women and create workplaces that really resonated for women. Amartha, being the overachieving company that it is, addressed this three-year plan pretty much in a single year. But some of the notable achievements, one of the things they found is that they could go off the reliance on a male guarantor for their women borrowers. And by so doing, by not relying always on a male guarantor, they opened up the opportunity to loan to single women and widowed women. And Aria told me earlier this morning that they've just been able to do a study to see if there was a credit dimension or if credit quality was lower for those unguaranteed loans and found there was no difference, right? So that's really opened up a market for them. They've also collaborated on training for both their employees and their customers with the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Tech in Asia, Microsoft Skills for Jobs in Indonesia, and the Indonesian Educational Fund Management. As a result of this, on the right-hand slide, you can see what was the impact. In 2 years, they have doubled their outreach. Their loan portfolio has doubled, and their outreach to women customers has increased 1.7 times. And if you see on the chart on the bottom, on the workforce outcomes, in nearly every product category, they've hired more women, and percentage of women has increased as well. So I have a few more slides, Aria, cut me off if I have time. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to show some more examples from our portfolio at large. So women clients, as I mentioned, have continued to have a higher retention rate than their male counterparts. And retention rates, of course, correlate with the company's ability to grow with the customer base and lower their acquisition costs. On average, we also see that women do outperform men in credit quality. In the charts on the bottom, you can see the correlation between, very clear correlation in our portfolio between percentage women clients and return on equity, as well as percentage women clients and average revenue growth. And then in the last slide, I just wanted to leave some examples of how an investor can actually influence outcomes. So during our holding period, with our first fund, we have a lot more trend data. And we've been able to see that through impressing on the institutions, gathering the gender data, seeing that the women actually have higher repayment rates, but women tend to get lower average loan sizes, which really doesn't make sense. We've been able to help institutions recognize that their best payers should not be getting the smallest loan sizes. And you can see that the average loan size gap has really collapsed within our portfolio companies. The other result that we're super proud of is specifically with women-owned SMEs. There's a narrative that even though women may be better repayers individually, they are not as good, or you'll see that narrative changing when we're talking about women-owned SMEs. And initially, when we invested in SME lenders, we actually saw that was true. The women-owned SMEs had worse credit quality. But we dug into that as an investor, and we tried to figure out, using segmentation analysis, what was driving that. And what we found is it really was the approach of the loan officer. And perhaps the incentive structures that were driving how women-owned SMEs were being approached. And when we reversed that, or when we trained loan officers on how to, first of all, identify high-quality women-owned SMEs, provide loan products that met their needs and preferences, and establish the relationships that those women needed in order to support their businesses, they actually did once again become better repayers. And so we've seen in our own portfolio, women-owned SMEs have a higher credit quality than the male-owned SMEs as well. So those are just some examples of how, as an investor, you can really change the outcomes for women. So thank you, Aria.
Thank you. Thank you for elaborating the statistics and also the success stories of your investments. Just in case you forget all the statistics that CJ has elaborated earlier, she was saying that women's road banking investment at Amartha was a successful one. That's the key message, right?
That's right.
Right, so yeah, I think Amartha has been able to prove ourselves that investing in women, investing in the grassroots economies are both profitable and also driving huge impacts. So what are the other metrics of success when we are talking about gender lens investing? What are the parameters that you are seeking from your investees?
Well, we do like to look at gender disaggregated data on several dimensions. And we do go deep with our individual portfolio companies to figure out how are they hiring, how are their women-owned SMEs versus male-owned SMEs performing. But I think when we look at social metrics, it's very important to have one or two metrics that are very easy to capture and that are applicable across portfolio companies so that we can compare as well. And so two metrics that we like to hold ourselves accountable for as investors is, at the moment we invested in the company, what was the percentage across that company's products that were going to women? And are we moving that dial up? Because we just believe women with access to finance increases their agency, increases their livelihoods, increases their ability to care for their families and engage with their communities. So we just want to see that percentage going up. And similarly for job creation, wherever that company was when we first invested in terms of employing women, we want to see that percentage going up. And so we look at that across our portfolio.
Thanks, CJ. I'll come back to Pak Rida. You mentioned earlier that currently the Indonesia investment authorities are not directly invest in MSMEs. But listening to CJ's that there are many opportunities to invest in the generalized investing, in the digitalizations at the grassroots level. So do you see that as a future avenues of where the INA is going? Do you really want to change the appetite of investment of INA from heavily on infrastructures at the moment into more startups, more MSMEs players in the market?
INA has, let me just maybe revisit what I said earlier. INA has dual mandate. One is to make sure that we actually can invest on an optimal risk-adjusted return, because we need to create values and wealth for your children or your grandchildren. So that's extremely important. And number two, we also want to be able to help Indonesia develop sustainably, right? Now, we're using that as an and, not an or. So if there is any developmental projects, let me just throw a joke a little bit, like, building a road to nowhere or a bridge to nowhere with no clear risk-adjusted return, but for developmental purposes, we will not be part of that. There are other development agencies who's doing that. Or if there are very high returning investments, but has little developmental angle, then we will not do that either. Now, investing in MSMEs, investing in Amartha, investing in venture capital that specifically help SMEs, Amartha has a higher content on women, seems to actually check both the balances of, wise risk-adjusted return and developmental angle. But we also have one other mandate that is actually written in the law, that we're supposed to invite foreign direct investments. That is the reason why our investments are, tend to be very large and very strategic. So our smallest investment is $40 million, and our biggest ticket size was $1 billion. We only have 68 people, and as mentioned, half of them are women. So we actually have to pick and choose, and we are very new. We are very seriously looking into perhaps helping the venture capital, and in fact, maybe some thematic investments. So it is in the outlook. It's just that, we are helping fixing the road and building the road, working with the state-owned entities in many, many areas. And that's what our current focus right now, but I'm not ruling out that we may be looking into that in the near future.
Thank you. We'll check it again, maybe next year. Pak Rida, thank you. Pak Rabin, you were like, you have extensive experiences in the regions and also internationally with international organizations. So I really want to convince investors to invest money into the MSMEs segment. So comparing to our peers in let's say in ASEAN, what are the improvements needed at our MSMEs to be able to be investment worthy? What are the requirements for them to be sexy from the point of view of investors?
From investor point of views, okay, let's look at it from the one that provide finance, okay? One thing that the government could do to improve the financial literacy, which is still very weak, right, is to set up a similar program like the Singaporean did, Money Sense program. Money Sense program is a program launched by the government of Singapore that teaches micros enterprises owner, right, to know how to just read simple balance sheets. Okay, I think that's very powerful because at the end of the day, you know, this is something that we've seen in our public sector banks. 60% of MSME credits are provided by public sector banks. So we know issues on the ground. And the issues on the ground oftentimes comes down to very simple, is that can they read balance sheets, right? So an integrated program launched by the government or by OJK, similar to what the Singaporean did, I think is going to be very helpful. You know, because we're dealing with informal sector workers here. I think that's one thing that could be done. Second, perhaps to boost the credit guarantee schemes. I mean, a number of countries have done so. We have it in our SOEs, Jamkrindos, right, that provide credit guarantee schemes for MSMEs. But then I think that needs to be expanded also to include the private sectors. Thirdly, I think one of the key targeted programs that government can focus is on the credit information systems. Because right now, it only covers the one that actually in the banking system. The informal sector workers are yet to be covered. So I think the government needs to be very innovative, right? SLIC, the one that's issued by OJK, is only covered those under one banking sectors.
Right, thank you. Back to CJ, you're an investor. How do you see the trend on the gender lens investing? Is it more popular these days among the investors to have a mandate on gender lens, impact-driven investments globally? How do you see it?
I think there's a lot of additional focus on gender lens investing. And there's a new industry body called 2X Global, which is really trying to put standards around what defines gender lens investing. I think that we still are learning what we can do as investors to be really effective. And I think that the data collection is really important, but the feedback loop, once you have that data, is also critically important. What is the data telling us? But is management seeing it? Are the boards taking it on? And very importantly, are managers being rewarded for actually delivering results on gender? Not just in the faster company growth, but I think personally. So that's where we want to see gender lens investing going, is, you know, having some real tangible results and people being rewarded for achieving those results.
Thanks, you're optimistic that we're getting there and there are many more vibes into gender lens investing.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to the audience for any questions. I couldn't see the screen is off, but we are inviting audience to ask questions to our distinguished panelists. I think we've listed some questions on Slido. Any question from the Slido? Okay, while waiting for, there is a question for Pak Rabin. What is the role of state-owned enterprises vis-a-vis the private sectors? How can SOEs both offer critical products and services while supporting innovation?
Yeah. Lost the question.
Could you project the question again for Pak Rabin?
Okay, I'll tell you this. The role of SOE, I think it's about collaborations. At the end of the day, SOE is supposed to be there to not crowd out the private sectors, but to work together with the private sector to introduce new solutions that supports the government's development agenda. Okay, and I know there's been a lot of maybe misperceptions about the SOEs. I think the SOE roles in here that we want to be able to work together with private sectors and collaborate together in order to produce the best products, right? Second, it's about the financial products, right?
Yeah.
From that on, I think there has been instances where we work together closely with the private sectors, right, to introduce new products. A good point is where our banks work together with, for instance, in terms of providing insurance for MSMEs, you know. We work together with our banks, BRI, collaborated, because one of the subsidiaries of BRI is a life insurance company. Founder strategic partner, FWD, right? We collaborate, set up a joint venture companies to work together to be able to address the issues on MSMEs insurance products. So those are some of the things that, that we have been introducing to our SOEs, is to collaborate more with the private sectors. I think that's the spirit right now.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Pak Rabin. So it's unfortunate that we are running out of time, but 1 minute to close this panel. In a very short, one short sentence, Pak Rida, what are you excited about Indonesia? We've discussed a lot of challenges, but in one short sentence, what is exciting about Indonesia?
You know, this is, a lot of times this is an interesting question because a few things. Number one, I hope I don't take this as I hope you guys don't take this as an offense. The SME is supposed to be developing something that they could be standing on their own, helping the communities and making money for themselves and grow. And a lot of times that requires building an extremely strong business model. I think Amartha is a good example where it's supposed to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, whether there are investors or no investors. A lot of times, our companies are thinking about how do we actually sell SMEs to foreign investors or other investors and hype the growth, and sometimes they are very unsustainable. So my strongest advice is to make sure that if you want to run an SME model, make sure it is sustainable, make sure it's good. If you run an extremely good business, investors will come on its own.
Okay.
It's not a hope of how do you sell it. You can dress it up, but you know, if the substance is not there, it's not gonna attract.
Thank you, Pak Rida. Pak Rabin, one short sentence. What are you excited about Indonesia?
I think just to follow what Rida said, and that's true. This is what we've seen it too in our banks and when we provide loans, you know. There needs to be an exit strategies, right, for the MSMEs, okay? Because I know it's very competitive, right? We do provide venture capital funds, but they need to think beyond that, you know, how they can leverage that and go to the capital market, right? I think that's the key issues in here. I'm very excited that Indonesia, especially Jakarta, has been stated as one of the best incubators place in the world, right? So I think we have that seeds, right? Innovation and creativity, I don't think it's something that's lacking with Indonesian people, right? The government right now is providing all the ingredients for them to develop even more. Now the question is that from the micro and small medium enterprises owner, they have to see where they want to go from here.
Okay.
And the government, obviously SOE, will help them.
Thank you, Pak Rabin. CJ, what are you excited about Indonesia?
Amartha.
Thank you.
But I'll echo what my co-panelists have said. I mean, what foreign direct investors look for in an investing environment is ease of doing business, ability to bring capital in and out of the country, a stable macro and economic environment, stable currency, and an environment where there's a lot of innovation and growth and supportive regulation to let small businesses, investable opportunities thrive. And I think really Indonesia within the Southeast Asian markets is one of the leaders on all of these fronts. And it's really encouraging to see how much focus is being given to that and efforts being made. So I think it's got a bright future.
Thank you for fueling more energy and optimism to Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, please give big round of applause to our distinguished panelists. Thank you CJ, thank you Pak Rabin, and thank you Pak Rida for joining this panel. Thank you.